বৰঠাকুৰ IS একাডেমি প্ৰস্তুতি আৰু অধ্যয়নৰ নিৰ্ভৰযোগ্য ঠিকনা বৰঠাকুৰ IS একাডেমি।
Hello everyone, welcome to the Hindu analysis for 23rd July 2021. Let us begin with the first article today. Limits of cooperation. Now, whenever we discuss about cooperative societies in India, we discuss about the problems that are associated with it. Right, even the author of this editorial says that cooperative movement in India certainly needs reforms and revitalization. There has been multiple attempts both at state level and central level to address this structural issue. The prominent one being the 97th Constitutional Amendment, and the most recent one being the creation of a specific ministry that directly and dedicatedly deals with cooperative societies under the Union Ministry. Now, one of the major problems that we see in regards to state cooperative societies or cooperative societies altogether is the political interference on its functioning. Because of the political interference, the elections that are supposed to take place regularly and openly, they don't happen. And also because of this politicization, many state cooperative societies are suspended frequently. The net result of political interference in the functioning of cooperative societies is many cooperative societies get suspended frequently. Their elections do not take place in a time-bound fashion. Because of this political interference, we do end up seeing a lot of corruption taking place in these cooperative societies. So, are all cooperative societies bad? The answer is a complicated no, because we have the shining example of a success story through Amul Cooperation, which is actually achieving its intended goal of empowering rural population of our country. On the other hand, we are seeing a semi-success story in the terms of sugarcane industry, where we see it struggling every year but nonetheless barely passing by. Then we have certain examples that are again throw negative shades on cooperative societies. But let us discuss about the attempts that the government of India made to address these structural issues. As I said, the prominent one being the 97th Amendment to the Constitution of India in 2012, and the most recent one being the creation of an union ministry. We discussed about the advantages and the fears behind the creation or the existence of such union ministry in the central government, because cooperative societies are a complicated subject, because state cooperatives come under state list. Any subject or matter that is in the state list comes under the purview of state legislation, and cooperative societies, particularly multi-state cooperative societies, come under concurrent list, meaning both state legislation and parliament can make laws in regards to those multi-state cooperative societies, but the parliament reigns supremacy in that matter because the subject is in concurrent list. Recently, the Supreme Court of India struck down some portions of the 97th Amendment, stating that these portions are unconstitutional and are antithesis to the federalism of our country. Now let us look at which parts of the Constitutional Amendment or the 97th Amendment that Supreme Court of India found to be troubling. Before going into that, let us understand the 97th Constitution Amendment itself. See, the attempt with the 97th Amendment was that they were trying to make cooperative societies function independently by autonomizing them. They were trying to democratize them by ensuring that elections take place in a time-bound fashion. Not only that, they were trying to professionalize it by professionalizing the management through institutionalizing certain changes such as minimum qualification required to hold on to the office of or a member of a state cooperative society or a cooperative society, and also the minimum requirements in terms of qualification that they need, and they also defined the tenure of a member of a cooperative society. They were trying to decouple or de-link cooperative societies from political control or political influence by kind of standardizing cooperative societies across all sections of the sector into a uniform structure. That was the intent behind 97th Constitutional Amendment. But as I said, certain portions of the 97th Amendment were struck down because the Supreme Court of India found them to be unconstitutional. Right? The Supreme Court said that to the extent it applied to cooperative societies under the control of state, the Supreme Court found it to be unconstitutional. Meaning, particularly, the Supreme Court of India found Part 9B of the 97th Amendment to be troubling, because Part 9B of the amendment talks about what state legislation must be doing in regards to cooperative societies. It was in essence directing or suggesting what structure a state government must adopt when it comes to cooperative societies, right? Part 9B, as I said earlier, included provisions in regards to the maximum number of directors a cooperative society can have. It also talks about creating reservations for SCs, STs and women in cooperative societies. As I said, it also talked about a limited duration for the tenure of elected members of a cooperative societies, the qualifications that each member should hold, and the qualifications that a chairman of a cooperative society must have to hold on to the office or to be eligible to hold or participate in elections, and many other provisions. As I said, the intent was to autonomize the cooperative societies, democratize the cooperative societies, and infuse a certain sense or demeanor of professionalism and professional management into the cooperative societies or cooperative movement itself. This was the part that Supreme Court of India found to be troubling, because they observed that the 97th Amendment impacted the legislative domain. Remember, the legislative domain comes under state legislature in this particular regard, because cooperative societies, particularly state cooperatives, come under state list. If any legislative or any amendment that impacts legislative domain of state legislatures, then that amendment or that piece of law must be ratified by half of the legislatures in the country, and in addition to that, that particular bit of legislation must have 2/3 majority in Parliament of India, which the 97th Amendment lacks, because again, cooperatives under the state need the ratification of 50% of the state. Now the Supreme Court observed that the part that we find troubling is only in relation to cooperative societies under the state. The amendment that holds good is related to multi-state cooperative societies. The Supreme Court is simply saying that we don't have problem with the entirety of the amendment. The part we have the problem with is it deals with cooperatives under the state. The legislation or the piece of the amendment that we don't have any problem with is the bit of the amendment that deals with multi-state cooperative societies, which Parliament can enact laws and it is competent to enact laws, because as I said earlier, this piece is important. State cooperatives come under state list. Only state legislatures can create laws in that domain. Central government cannot encroach upon this part of the distribution of powers. While multi-state cooperatives come under concurrent list, which parliament is competent to enact laws, right? I hope it is clear right now. Now, the Supreme Court again said that certain kinds of amendments to the constitution must be ratified by 50% of the state legislatures. That part is clear. Now the Supreme Court also, or one piece of judgment that we have to give importance to is, ratification requirement will apply if there is any attempt to fetter the state legislatures in any way while enacting a law in their own domain. That bit is clear, right? The Supreme Court also says that even if there is no attempt to alter the distribution of legislative powers between union and state, then also that piece of legislation, if it is encroaching in the domain of state, must pass the muster of constitutionality, right? Because the absence of ratification by states, the amendment, particularly the 97th amendment, that tried to describe the outlines of state laws on a state subject, did not pass the constitutional muster. That is what the Supreme Court of India observed, right? When you look at the amendment itself, as I said clearly earlier, the scope of trying to autonomize, democratize the functioning of cooperative societies was in a bid to enhance and an attempt to reform and revitalize the cooperative movement. But that intent does not mean that you can simply encroach, or the parliament or the union government can simply encroach into state domain. Even if the intent is a good one, you must follow constitutional procedures that are laid down in Constitution. So in this case, the 97th amendment, though the intent is good, though the intent is reformative, though the intent is democratizing in nature, it must be ratified by 50% of the state legislatures and also attain 2/3 of the majority in the Parliament of India, which the 97th amendment does not have. While saying this, the Supreme Court, as I said earlier, found only fault with the parts dealing with the state legislature or state domain and did not find any fault in the multi-state cooperative societies, because it comes under concurrent list and the union government is competent to enact laws in that domain. When we were discussing this judgment earlier, we said how important it is to retain or reassure the federal structure of our polity. That is what, this is what I meant when we were discussing that article. At any cost, the constitutionality must be maintained and due procedures must be followed when enacting laws, particularly in laws that are directly impacting or encroaching state legislative domains or state legislative powers. That is antithesis to separation of powers in our country. Okay. Moving on to the next article. Analysis by NGO reveals microplastics in Ganga. India suffers from marine pollution to a larger extent, but sadly this does not get the coverage that it ought to get in public discourse. Now, recently a NGO carried out an analysis on the stretches of river Ganga and revealed startling data. They revealed that the stretches of Ganga that they carried out this analysis found to be polluted by microplastics. Microplastics are nothing but synthetic solid particles that are sized ranging from 1 micrometer to 5 millimeter, which are insoluble in water. Now, the central government has this massive multi-crore undertaking called National Mission for Clean Ganga that tries to rid of Ganga of contamination, and Ganga flows through 5 states, and these 5 states contribute a lot of pollution to river Ganga. Now, microplastics across the world are recognized as a major source of marine pollution. In this case, in Ganga's case, microplastics are recognized to be the major source of marine pollution in river Ganga. Right? Particularly, this NGO found highest concentration of such plastic waste in Varanasi. The plastic particles contained single-use plastic and secondary plastic products. Now, one of the primary reasons, as I said earlier, is Ganga being on the banks of 5 major states, Ganga flowing through 5 major states. They contribute a lot of pollution to river Ganga. The states that we are discussing are Uttarakhand, Uttar Pradesh, Jharkhand, Bihar and West Bengal. The primary sources of pollution from these respective states is tanneries in Kanpur, distilleries, paper mills, sugar mills in the Kosi, Ramganga and Kali river catchment areas. These are found to be the major contributors of pollution to river Ganga in our country. Right? Now let us discuss about Namami Ganga project or Namami Ganga program. Right? Namami Ganga program is the flagship program being implemented by Union Government of India. It was first set up in June 2014 with 2 objectives in mind. One was abatement of pollution and conservation and rejuvenation of national river Ganga. These were the 2 objectives of Namami Ganga program. Now the idea was to essentially clean the river of the pollution that it contains now and prevent further dilution or further pollution of the river altogether. Right? This program is being operated under the Department of Water Resources, River Development and Ganga Rejuvenation under Ministry of Jal Shakti. Right? Again, the nodal agency is National Mission for Clean Ganga and its state's counterpart organizations under the nodal agencies of State Program Management Group, SPMGs. Now, the main pillars of the program are sewage treatment infrastructure and industrial effluent monitoring. The second pillar is riverfront development and river surface cleaning, biodiversity and afforestation, and finally public awareness. It is a 360-degree program that tries to identify the problem, solve the problem and prevent future pollution taking place altogether by taking proactive steps. Right? It is funded by the central government. It allocated 20,000 crores and again this is a non-lapsable corpus fund and it consists of nearly 288 projects with new projects added yearly to address ever developing challenges in regards to cleaning this river. But in certain states, in certain regions, this program found success. But when you look at the overall projections, when you look at the overall results, this program is struggling to find its foot. Because until and unless you address the core issues of the causes of pollution in our country, you cannot achieve at the end result of creating a clean and pollution-free Ganga. Remember, the project started in 2014. It got a refresh in 2016 when the National Ganga Council was again replaced with the National Ganga River Basin Authority. Then it was given more powers, it was allocated more funding, and new projects were brought under its ambit. Despite this period, despite this much money being spent, in 2021 or 2020, whenever this study was conducted, we are still seeing large scale presence of microplastics in the water. Again, marine pollution is detrimental to human health also. So what do we understand from this study is that until and unless you address the sources of pollution, which this program tries to, actually this program, the Namami Ganga program, Ganga Rejuvenation Development, whatever the program or the funding that goes into, tries to address this pollution at source issue, right? They are trying to control the inflow of pollution into the river itself, but due to the large scale of the program or the project itself, it is failing to meet the deadlines that they set for themselves. Until certain core issues are solved in regards to the contributing factors of pollution to the river Ganga, the project might not achieve its intended target of a clean Ganga in the near future. Maybe we will discuss in the future what are the issues, what would be the possible ways that we can achieve a clean Ganga in the future, and what would be a scenario where the projects that we are talking about right now need to be implemented in a certain way so that further pollution doesn't increase, or the further pollution levels in the river Ganga do not increase beyond a point. Moving on to the next article, government nod for Central University in Ladakh. Now the Union Cabinet on Thursday finally approved an establishment of a new Central University at a cost of 7,500 crore and an integrated multi-purpose infrastructure development corporation in Union Territory of Ladakh. So when we discuss about Ladakh or the Union Territory of Ladakh, for a long period of time, it has to be said that Ladakh has been neglected, right? Whether the council issue, whether the funding issue, or the distribution of funds when it was part of erstwhile state of Jammu and Kashmir, Ladakh has been largely neglected or ignored. Now with the creation of Union Territory of Ladakh, the central government also seems to have a renewed approach towards addressing these structural issues in Ladakh, and setting up of a central university at a cost of 7,500 crore and also an integrated multi-purpose infrastructure development corporation in Union Territory is also a welcome step. Remember, Ladakh is a critical component of our Indian state and also in terms of national security, because it borders China and we have an active border right now. The more developed Ladakh is, the better it is for India. Moving on to the next article, RBI plans digital currency pilot soon. Now the Reserve Bank of India is in plans to start off a pilot project to assess the viability of using digital currency to make wholesale and retail payments to help calibrate its strategy for introducing a full-scale central bank digital currency. Remember, a central bank digital currency is different from a cryptocurrency. Now let us discuss about what central bank digital currency is. A central bank digital currency uses an electronic record or a digital token to represent the virtual form of a fiat currency of a particular nation. In this scenario, we are talking about the virtual representation of a rupee, because rupee is our fiat currency. Now we are talking about a digital rupee. A central bank digital currency is centralized. A cryptocurrency is not a centralized entity. It is issued and regulated by competent monetary authority of a country. A cryptocurrency is neither issued nor regulated by a central authority. That is the entire attraction to the cryptocurrency or crypto market together. It is not centralized. It is actually democratized. Nobody has control. Nobody has authority of what the currency or how the currency behaves or what value it holds. In opposite to that, a CBDC is centralized. It is issued and regulated by a monetary authority of the country. It is actually centralized digital currency. That is why central banking digital currency name comes from. So what is the global scenario? To this date, no country has officially launched a CBDC. The first country to start talking about CBDC was UK. Recently, United States Treasury came out and said that we are launching a pilot program to study our digital dollar, but that is also in planning phases because they are pilot testing, that they are trying to figure out the modalities of the entire pilot project altogether. So no country has officially launched a CBDC to date, and many central banks, however, are willing to look into this because they have launched the pilot programs. They are conducting active research, particularly to determine the viability and usability of a CBDC. That is what the RBI is also talking about. We are trying to see the viability and usability of a CBDC. Now, what CBDC entails? A CBDC, a central bank digital currency, acts as a digital representation of country's fiat currency, in our case rupee. So since it is a digital representation of our currency, it will be backed by suitable amount of monetary reserves like gold or foreign currency reserves. This is exact opposite of cryptocurrencies. Cryptocurrencies are not centralized. Cryptocurrencies are not regulated by competent monetary authorities, and cryptocurrencies are not backed by suitable amount of monetary reserves like gold or foreign currencies. The underlying technology is similar. They use cryptography, but their principles and their operating procedures are entirely different. This centralizes authority in a single body. Cryptocurrencies decentralize the entire structure. They are actually democratic in nature because nobody controls the cryptocurrency or crypto market. That is why it is very attractive. That is why we are seeing large scale adoption around the world. But this is a change in policy for our RBI, because though in the initial stages they said that they are for or against cryptocurrency, their stand is very unclear at this point of time. On looks of it, they are against cryptocurrencies, and with this decision it clearly seems that RBI is against cryptocurrencies because they are trying to bring in their own digital currency into the ecosystem, and with this in the foray, I don't think they'll encourage cryptocurrencies in India. So again, it is a matter of time, but again you cannot say for sure that cryptocurrencies will be banned in India. As of now, there is a shadow ban on them, right? But from time to time, the RBI themselves and finance ministries come out and say that we are looking into the process of it. We are not against it, but we are not for it also at the same time. They themselves are ambiguous or oblivious to the fact that they don't have a clarity. But nonetheless, in a step that is actually tries to give some sort of structure to the whole discussion of digital currencies in India, RBI planning to start their own digital currency, or at least a pilot project of it in a matter of months or in near future, is again a welcome sign, and might, one must hope always, might lead to India accepting cryptocurrencies, or at least the underlying technologies in our country. Remember, whatever anybody says, India kind of missed the bus on cryptocurrencies. we kind of missed, but I sincerely hope that's not the case, but this is my personal view, that we missed our chance in adopting cryptocurrencies or crypto technology in our country. But nonetheless, albeit late, this is a welcome sign. Thank you. Stay safe. Namaste.
বৰঠাকুৰ IS একাডেমি প্ৰস্তুতি আৰু অধ্যয়নৰ নিৰ্ভৰযোগ্য ঠিকনা। বৰঠাকুৰ IS একাডেমি।